And the intent of this really is to take us beyond what I covered last time, which was using a desktop tool to create, RAGs and things like this. So really, how do you go about developing an AI agent yourself? And the tooling and what's out there has become much easier to use than what you've had before, both because of AI and just the advent of no code, low code. So I want to go through that and then dive into some examples and actually code up some agents live and then discuss how that could be used from there. And the reason I said, about Excel macros is not because I'm going to teach about Excel macros. We're going to, develop those. It's more about saying if you have that kind of technical nature to go in that depth within a spreadsheet, you can easily be writing AI agents as well. It's that level of technical know-how that gets you there. You don't have to be a programmer or anyone that's deeply, deeply technical to be able to do this. One of the things I want to do is set some context of what is an AI agent, because you hear a lot about agents and there's different types of agents. And I think it's important to provide the distinction between the two. The one most commonly used, and probably should be the most commonly used today, is the agent workflow. And this is more directed. This is an agent you can develop, and that's what I'll show you today, that says, do this in step 1, and then step 2, step 3, maybe update a spreadsheet, and you're very directive. Versus an automated agent, or when you start talking about agentic frameworks, is really about giving that agent agency and letting it make a choice as to how it does things and how it goes about that. And you just tell them, hey, here's your tools. You figure out how to use the tools in the context that I give you. Versus in the workflow, you're telling it which tool to use when. And you can even do human in the loop between the two, which is this idea that as the agents make decisions, they can say, hey, do you approve this or not? And you get that in a Slack message or an SMS or a Discord message, whatever. So you can stay involved even when the agent is fully automated, especially as you're learning and trying to start to do things. You probably want to do that. And then later, once you gain confidence that it can work autonomously, then you can take yourself out of the loop at that point as well. Anja covered this, I think, in the last session more than what I will here, but I just wanted to set the context because as we go through this, we will be doing some of the prompting. There's different types of prompts. There's the system prompt, which is really how you give the agent a persona. It's how they know what they are and what they do, and it becomes a filter on how they look at what they're inferencing when they make decisions. The way LLMs work is weights get set in terms of how the neural network's mapped and who's doing things. Prompts don't necessarily change that, but they help to highlight which paths it should be taking. So if I say, hey, I want you to be a great web copyright agent, it's going to then filter that to say, as it's looking at the results and going through and processing and the weights that are coming out of the LLM, it's going to orient it in that direction. And that's where the system prompts come in. And what I find, just like in human teams, having teams of agents that have different personas and expertise are going to be much more effective than trying to have one agent that knows it all. I don't know if you've ever worked with someone who thinks they know it all. They tend not to. And you're better off having a strong team that can communicate and do things and have their own expertise and perspectives that they bring to the table. And that's where system prompts come in, is to create that different personas within all the different agents. User prompts, of course, are what you're talking about, what you're asking, what you're saying to the LLM. It's really the user part of the prompting. And then, of course, agent prompts are when it comes back and asks a question or give you details. I actually saw a funny meme yesterday where when Chuck Norris talks to an LLM, it starts asking him questions only, right? But that's when an agent does. And agents will ask questions. There's ways to get them to adapt and ask you clarifying questions as you go through and almost create an application dialogue in what you're doing there. And there's the rest of it. One of the things we're going to cover today, and what I think this makes approachable for folks, is the advent of no-code visual environments as well as low-code. So you have environments where you can, and I'll go into what some of these tools are in the next slide, where you can do everything purely through drag and drop visual associations. You don't have to write any code. You don't have to do anything more technical than kind of understand some basic logic of how things hang together in a visual interface. And then you have the hybrid platforms. And this is where I've been gravitating to, and what I'll be showing today is the ability to do everything in a drag and drop interface, but when you need to, drop down. But the beauty is I'm still not writing code because you have the idea of vibe coding, which has kind of come up in the last, I think, just few weeks as a term. All right, things are changing so quickly, which is this idea that you just sit back and talk to it and it does all the coding, and you get actually audio interfaces back and forth. It doesn't have to be, but the point is you're not doing any coding whatsoever. It's the AI agent that's doing it, and you're doing it all through natural language interfaces. Now, it's not that the agent is coding in English, it's coding still in whatever programming language. But as an interface, you can just sit back and do that. So even with the hybrid, you have the ability to say, hey, I'm going to map this together. I'm going to drop down because I've got to, massage the data to fit into a spreadsheet, right? Or something like that. With hybrid, you can actually say, hey, open a window, I'm going to code, but then you just tell the AI agent itself, hey, you write the code for me. Here's what I want it to do. So you still have to have some awareness of what to ask for. But again, you're not actually having to code even in the hybrid form. And I've been doing that lately on some work I've been doing where the AI assistant within the platform actually does it for me. So I'm going to stop there. Any questions or feedback or insights? Because there's other AI experts on here as well that might have something to say.
Just
Yes, great.
quick comment. Sorry. Yeah, it's funny. I started to see. I mean, granted, I have my questions about the whole vibe coding thing just because of I have a software engineering background. Not that I have anything against the prototyping, which I think is wonderful. It's just making robust code from that and being able to deterministically find bugs. But I've been hearing also some start suggesting regarding no code and low code that because natural language is becoming the interface, is that kind of squeezing what the no low code platforms are actually able to do, and will they actually potentially be replaced? Is one thing I've kind of heard as a possibility.
Yeah, and I think in the long term, you're spot on. I think in the long term, we'll interact with computers in very different ways than we do now, just across the board. But I think there's a step in the interim, which is it's much easier to reason about what's happening and how it's working, especially for non-technical folks, if you have a user interface. And you'll see when we execute a particular flow, you'll see step by step what it does visually and how that works. So you get more cues than you do if you're just interacting. Because I find in the vibe coding world, I do quite a bit of it. Now that it's called vibe coding, right? It has a name. You still have to know what you're doing. You still have to know what to ask for. You still have to know the basics of architecture. It will get spinning around and not working. You got to dive in and kind of pull it out of its own way. So we're a ways off. And I think the visual coding is what I'm gravitating to just because it allows me to reason much more easily about what's happening. One of the things that frustrates me about vibe coding is none of them take into account DevOps or unit testing or anything like that. And I think that should be default, right? But anyways, I digress. Yes, and Jeff.
Not a question, actually. Two things that's a follow-up. One is I keep hearing people are, sorry, in general, people are saying, is it going to replace this? Is it going to replace that? And I probably should have another conversation for it, but I'm just wondering, is that a problem? Because it keeps coming up, number one. Number two, I come from a computer science background, right? And yeah, you're right about, Jason, you're right about, we don't think about particularly the DevOps
Yep.
sector. I was a manager of a DevOps team, and on call all the time, so I can deeply,
You like to
deeply
sleep at night.
sympathize. No, it's fine. It's fine. Like, it was a great time, and it just,
Yeah.
But you're right. And I do think that I'm using Cursor AI right now to write some of my own little tools, and it's just brought me a lot of joy. It's brought me a
Yep.
lot of
Yep.
joy because I don't have to learn JavaScript, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So,
Yep. I hate
uh,
JavaScript.
right. Okay. So thank you. I feel closer to you already.
There you go.
But yeah, this is really exciting. I think it opens up a whole nother dimension of just enabling people and
Yes.
enabling those, and lowering the barrier is a great term for it. Lowering the barrier of, if you can dream it, you could probably get very far with the tools that we have today, and probably even further tomorrow.
100%. Agree completely. And yeah, on the vibe coding side of things, it really is. I haven't had to learn Rust, but yet I'm writing Rust applications, which are highly performant and things like this.
Yes.
And it's opened the world to me in very different ways than I thought possible even a couple of years ago. And I'm using Root Code with Visual Studio myself,
Mhm.
and also got access to Manus. But I only do so much on Manus because there's certain implications of using a hosted version versus something local.
Yep.
But it
Yep.
feels like every week I have to try something new. So it's good and bad in that I kind of there's a lot of new opportunities, but it also could be a distraction. I'm constantly learning new things when in reality, not getting great at any one tool today.
Absolutely. All the shiny objects.
And yeah, I've got some um, lack of focus sometimes, so it definitely works on me. And speaking of, here's the universe of different tools that are out there, and this is by no mean everything or all the latest, but it gives you a framing of where they are. You have integration platforms like Zapier, or I should probably put IFT on here, which is IFTTT, which is a very simple way to be able to draw triggers. A lot of people use it for home automation, things like this, simple steps that you do things. And they've started to add the AI capabilities into them as well. So they're starting to kind of merge and cross over. You have different AI enhanced workflows and workflow tools out there. And then, of course, application development, which is what, Ange and I were just talking about, and Greg, touched upon in terms of tools that let you do full application development. But they're still far from perfect and far from replacing folks. And I think, the fear of being replaced is you're not going to be replaced by AI, but you're going to be replaced by people that know how to use AI. Right. So I think it's incumbent on everyone to begin to learn and understand. An example is, my 13-year-old son's playing volleyball. I've got to go to the game tonight. And all I got was a photo he took of the spreadsheet of the games and the dates on it. So I fed that into an LLM or into an N8N script that read it, turned all the calendar information into JSON script, and then put it in my calendar for me. Right. So just day-to-day things that you can do and automate and keep better track of your life are all now possible and approachable. And what I'm going to focus on today is a platform called N8N. And I like N8N because it's both a hosted service, so it can be very easy to get up and running. They have a free tier that can get you doing a lot of stuff without having to pay a dime. And then if you want to upgrade and use professional, capabilities, it has that, but it's also open source. So you can take it and run it locally. And I've got it running local on a Docker image as well. So it gives you that flexibility of, I want things easy, so I'll just let them host it and do it, or I want to, build my own infrastructure and take it from there. That doesn't mean that, this is the best tool out there or the only tool, but it's just the one I've chosen to use because of those factors that I value when I work with a different platform. If something's completely closed and proprietary, I tend to shy away from it just because you get lock-ins that you don't realize later that an open source escape hatch is always a good thing to have. All right, so let's jump into it. So this is N8N. They recently changed their branding. I'm not sure I like it within the last week or so. It's a little too, in your face, but that's not what's important. But again, it's free, so you can sign in. It's also open source, so the code is all out there of what you want to do. There are certain hooks in the cloud version that they're going to keep proprietary and charge for. You can't blame them for that. They got to pay the bills. But sign in and you can get a free one. You have up to 5 active scripts in one, and you're off and running. The other thing it has is a very active community of existing automation templates. So right now there's 1,723. It's always building. They have different capabilities. I pulled one because I'm teaching my kids how to do AI generated video work. And there's a workflow out there that does all that for you. And then we'll post it on all the different social media. And you just go through and configure and give it your prompts and things like that. So there's a lot of things you can build upon within this as well, not start with just a blank template. But today we'll start with a blank template because we're going to focus more on the intrinsics and the basics of what we're doing. So these are some of the workflows I have right now. And you have, this is showing essentially folders that I've got that I'm working on, different things. There's my create calendars I was just talking about a minute ago. I do have another account where most of my scripts are at, but this one I use more for demos and showing folks things. And then you have your workflows. And what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to create a workflow. And the workflow is essentially, a process you want to develop. And you just add a first step. And in this case, you've got to add a trigger. How does this decide when it gets run? And you can do things like trigger it manually, just come in, click a button on an event from another application on a schedule. You can say, do this every morning at 7 a.m. Some form. What I'm going to do here is we're going to create a chat bot, essentially, someone to do it on a chat message. Right? There's some details you can put in here, but largely you don't have to worry about this. What comes out boilerplate is good enough. Just click behind it. Now you've got this up and running. Next thing we want to do is we want to say, okay, let's give it something to do. And there's a whole series of things you do. Remember, I mentioned human in the loop earlier, where human in the loop can be notified and say whether it should go to the next step or not based on information. What we're going to do here is we're going to go into the AI component. And there's different AI components. There's OpenAI, which uses the message assistant on GPT. We're not going to go into that today. That's a whole other subject. That's probably a whole other webcast. And other things, in here as well, again, which we won't go into. What we're going to focus on today is the AI agent. Simply click on that. And here, really don't have to worry about anything in there. Just click and you're off and running. So now you've got an agent, but the agent doesn't have a brain, doesn't have any memory, and doesn't have any tools yet. You have the ability to say, okay, let me give it the chat model, which is its brain, Llama, where you can run local models if you're going to run this locally. So I'm going to delete that and go back so I can actually, because I want to do the OpenAI one. So again, you've got Anthropic, you've got Azure, AWS, DeepSeek if you want to use it, the Google Gemini. And all of these are moving so fast and in terms of versions and things like that, you can't go wrong with most of them for most of your basic applications. But maybe there's some kind of feed where we could keep internally, in OpenWater, like, hey, here's the latest model and why you might want to use it, because it is changing so fast that it's hard to keep up with. So we go with OpenAI here, and within this, you have all the different models that are in OpenAI. And of course, the new hotness is the GPT 4.1, which is meant to be one of the best out there. Things like the Mini, which is meant to be very good for coding, or 4.1 for general work on this. So if I click on that, we now have a brain, right? And now this AI agent will use the OpenAI GPT 4.1 model to do that. Now, you could have multiple agents within this, and each agent could use its own model, further enriching, right? The idea that each agent should have a specialization. The specialization may not just be its prompt, it could also be which AI model it's using. Because there may be some things it needs to do that can be done cheaply and faster. So you might use a mini model that doesn't cost as much. For the more thinking agent that can say, hey, I'm going to, do more sophisticated reasoning, I'm going to use a bigger, more expensive model to do that. So again, it's all mixable and matchable. Then you have the idea of giving it memory. And memory is essentially, memory store that allows it to keep context within a particular chat session or group of chat sessions. And there's different, options to use external capabilities here, but I tend to use simple memory because, again, I don't have to worry about it. I don't have to configure anything. It just works. Now, is it going to do a lot of sophisticated things and persistence across, all sorts of domains? No, but for an application like this, it's fine. So now I have an agent that has, and you see, I've not done any coding. I've not gone into any of the parameters beyond, the version or which model within OpenAI that I'm using. And I already have an agent up and working. So I could actually say, open the chat and say, how do I make a soft-boiled egg, right? And you can also see this point I was coming back to earlier, Greg, you can see the execution and how it executes that and the information that you get back. So you can see that simply I already have my own AI chat model up and running. Now, of course, it's just using standard, GPT 4.1, which actually is only available over the API. It's not available on the web interface. Only 4.0 is. So if you want to get access to 4.1, this is one of the only ways to do it today. And you're off and running, right? It's really this simple to have your own agent up and running. Now you can go into this agent, right? And, add an option here to give it a system message, right? And here right now, it just says you are a helpful assistant, but I could put in a much more sophisticated advanced prompt here and have it behave as a certain persona. That might be, I've used prompts. I'm a big fan of AI for work, where I can say, hey, I want the prompt of a corporate lawyer, and I'm going to feed it now a series of documents to have it review for me. I can effectively create this agent just with that prompting. Just a second here. Right, by adding that prompt within the system message right there. And now it becomes that persona as well each time. And it's that easy. Now, one of the big things is if I want to create a agent that has a workflow, I could put things over here happening. So I could say, hey, based on this information, I want to add it to a Google Sheet, for example. Right, that becomes a workflow where I'm going to go and prescribe it to say, now you're going to do a particular thing, which is you're going to append a row based on this information in this next step, right? And you go in there, I could say, even though I haven't given you, the full details, but I can go in there and say things like, you've got your data coming in. I can map that into where it goes into the spreadsheet, things like that. It's not coding, but you are getting a little more technical as you get deeper into it. So that's the workflow. That's where you're kind of saying, okay, the agent's done a thing. Now you're going to go to the next step, the next step, the next step. But with this, you also have the ability just to give the tool to an agent. So I could say, hey, you now have the ability to get a row. Let me see here. I'll bring something up because I already have this wired into up here is where you give it your credentials. This is probably the most technical thing you have to do is give it credentials, which is really just logging into your Google account, right? Or getting an OpenAI API key to do that. And when you do that, it has, more info. You can get help, right? It'll walk you through exactly how to get credentials for whatever service or interface you want to use. And with this one, it's just signing into my Google account to be able to do that. So it should already have access. I've got the short video form I was doing with my kids, and I can say, oh, it's in the sheet, right? And now it can read that spreadsheet. So I can say something like, hang on, tell me what is in the first row of my spreadsheet using your Google, your tools. I don't actually have to tell it that, but I want the demo to go well. I'm praying to the demo gods that it's actually going to do this. Right now you can see that's what's in my first row of my spreadsheet. And I didn't have to tell it how to do it. I didn't have to tell it the steps to do it. This is where I've given it a tool, and it now has agency to decide when it's going to use that tool. And then I can give it another tool that says, hey, I want to be able to, instead of get rows, I'm going to create rows, or I'm going to append rows, right? And what I'm doing there, back into that same spreadsheet, right? All of these things, and I'm just going to leave it there for now. It's not fully configured, but now you can see it now has a tool to append to the spreadsheet or to read the spreadsheet. And this could be any number of things, right? If we come over to the different tools that are out there, right? There's just, this is where it gets a little technical. You have to know what tools you want to use and things like that. But for everyday things, you've got Google Spreadsheets, you've got Signal, you've got Slack, you've got Discord, you've got Microsoft tools. You can go into your Microsoft account and read spreadsheets or inject things into Teams. I actually wrote a bot for Teams to do this, right? So you have all these different tools, and it really is just drag and drop and do things. I am going to save this quickly as my water. I'm a geek. I've got a coding background. I've been software guy all my life in some fashion, and I don't give it up anytime soon. And just being able to do this and this level of stuff as quickly as you can is just amazing to me. So let me show you another one that I did. This again was a little project with my kids. The old idea that you can go and generate ideas with AI and then automate them with all the different tools that are out there. So the idea generation, this lets me learn things as well on how to use this. And within N8N, you have the ability to also add sticky notes. So you can give context and instructions and things like that as you're passing these around and sharing them. And they go behind the objects. So they're actually pretty good. So that's how I've done this here. So here I've created my AI agent, and N8N actually recently allowed the think mechanism, right? To give some more reasoning capability to the tools and instructing them to do that. And I've been using that in this case because I wanted to think about the examples it's giving, right? And then, here in my system prompt, I went more sophisticated by developing, a prompt in JSON. And anytime you do a prompt that's encoded in a data format, you're giving it more context. And just like humans, you give something more context, it's going to be better at doing something. So by labeling the data, you're essentially giving it a lot more context. Yes, go ahead, Anja.
Yes. The previous thing that you showed, it was a previous modal.
Yes, the think.
The think, yes. That looks a lot like a system prompt.
Yep.
Help me understand how it's different and how we should use it differently.
Yeah, so in this case, it's going to use it when it thinks it needs to use it. So it's not always a part of the context, right?
Okay.
So you're right. You could put it just in the system prompt here and have it think. But in this case, there may be scenarios where it doesn't need to think. And it makes that decision. Do I need to go deeper and spend more tokens or not? And then it will add it to the context from there based on the tooling. Right. So this kind of, drifts into, model context protocol as well, a
Mhm.
little bit, where you have the ability to effectively provide more context of what the tools do to an agent. And that's probably a whole other session. But within this, you have the ability to use MCP and MCP servers as well, which provide a lot more tool context also.
Mhm. All right, we'll have to save that for the next one. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. We can do the deep dive one. You also have in here I'm telling it as a tool to read the rows because I just wanted to do that right out of the gate, right? I don't have to tell it, here's what the data looks like, anything else, because it can read the columns, it can read the rows, and it can reason about what the data is and make decisions, right? And in this case, what I'm telling it to do is, give me the top 100, science and technology fails in human history and what we learned from it. And then go do, some meme videos around that kind of thing. So that's what the agent does. And I tell it in this case to actually encode it in JSON so I can do more with it as I go down the road here. So in this case, this is an example where I asked AI saying, hey, I need to take it from this JSON format to expose these fields to do these things. And it actually generated the code for me in this case. I didn't have to actually write this code. It did it, but I still had to know to ask it to do something. So this gets a little more deeper and kind of quasi coding as you get into it. And then I split it out and I say, hey, take these data objects. It's an array of objects or multiple objects of the same type that then it goes through and loops and it inserts it into my spreadsheet, right? So I can try and run this and we'll see if it works. And pray to the demo gods here. So I can say something like, give me the top 10 or no, top 20 historical science and technology fails and what humanity learned from them. Ensure to put the output in JSON based on the format and fields of the spreadsheet. Right? So I can do something like that. Now I'm not actually going to run this because it'll take a little while to do it. And I know it did work because I did it earlier. If I go to my sheets, when I run this, I think it's in here. No, where did I put it? It's on. Anyways, take my word for it. It generated a spreadsheet with 20 different options for me to go out and do that I can then come over here and say, this is a lot more detailed. I'm not going to go into all the details of it, but this is the one that actually generates the videos itself, right? And all I have to do is then feed it that spreadsheet. It goes line by line. It'll do that, and then it will actually even go and post all of those. And I didn't write this. I stole this off of the template engine, right? That's already out there as an example. So here it'll go out and post that to all the different social media platforms out there to do that. And this is how you're seeing a lot of content get generated out there now, for better or worse. I'm not here to pass judgment on whether we should be doing this or not. But the point is the capability is there, and it's a good example that people can reason about on how you actually do this. All right, I'm going to pause there and open it up because that covers most of what I want to do in terms of kind of showing the tool and what's possible. And now it's more about, what are the questions of, how would you apply this? Where would you apply this? How do you approach it, and kind of open it up to the group for a discussion there. So maybe Justin, you want to make some comments about how you might look to use this in what you're doing.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, given that I'm talking mostly to non-technical folk, keeping it at the very straightforward level and using examples that fit in with their real life has been where I've found the most interest. I mean, otherwise, even though we think of these as very straightforward, and I'm at no point anywhere near the complexity that you are, they can become quite intimidating. So what I'm doing in basic stuff is looking for things like communication. I'd like to put out a daily blog or a LinkedIn post or something like that. And I'm very much human in the loop because there's a lot of skepticism about AI generated content. So I say, well, why don't we set it up? If you want to post twice a week, why don't you get a story every day through some process like the one you described, and then you can decide whether or not to post it. I'm not finding that people are yet comfortable, although it's a very easy step to go, as you just showed us, to the point where you put a human in the loop and then say, go ahead. Just stopping it before that and saying, okay, bit of cut and pasting is still there, not so much because it's a efficient process, but because it gives comfort that I'm retaining some control over the process. So we're looking at that, and then classifying. And I noticed as you skipped over, there is a function within N8N to do text classification, where you could say, I want you to look at my emails, and there's three things. There's a complaint, there's a compliment, or there's something else. And so I leave a big something else there, but at least in the meantime, I'm doing a basic classification. And when I come in the morning, I can first jump into complaints and respond to those, and or leave the compliments till the end of the day when I'm beaten down, and then really focus my heart on something else. So I think that idea of classifying is also simplifying and speeding up, inbox management, etc.
Yeah, in fact, I recently wrote a bot that goes through my email and determines what's a marketing email, and then figures out how to do the unsubscribe for me. Right? Because I find myself, because I'm signing up for so much AI stuff right now, I'm ending up on so many email lists. It's crazy, and I just don't want to take the time to go and do the unsubscribe. So I wrote a bot to do that as an example. And it's pretty straightforward. And in that case, I did do some text classification in terms of, is this a marketing email? And then depending on if it's on my approved list or not, I might have a human in the loop to make sure, hey, maybe I don't want to unsubscribe to this particular one. But if it's something that's purely a marketing thing, then yeah, get rid of it and let it go as personal automation. Yes, Greg.
No,
I see
I
you
was
taking off your mic.
No, I was just going to say you should contribute that back to the libraries for a template.
Exactly. Everybody could use that one. There used to be services out there to do it for you, but they all seem to have disappeared somehow on that. Yeah, and I think, to your point, Justin, is that it's start where you can. What I'm trying to do here is say the art of the possible. It's approachable. You can get very sophisticated if you want to, but the point is just start trying. Anthropic, the Claude interface in the desktop actually has tool capabilities. You can wire it into your Google domain for sheet access and document access and things like that. So there's even easier ways to do this without getting into visual flows and stuff like that, to be able to talk to your document library and things like that. And just if you start reasoning about how you map it together and drive utility from it, you're going to be much better off. Because to the point before, as we were talking about, Anja, is sure, we could be replaced by AI eventually, but I think you're much more likely in the short term to be replaced by people that know how to use AI. And that's where the competition is really going to come from. So I urge everyone to take the time to figure out how to sprinkle it into what you do on a daily basis, both personally and professionally, because others are and are going to continue to do so. All right. Any other input or insight? If not, I think I've covered the key points. And as we publish this, all the links will be out there, all the details. Feel free to reach out to me, message me, and like I said, the whole point here is just to show the art of the possible and inspire people to start engaging these kinds of tools and understand it is approachable if you have some basic, know-how in using different applications out there.